Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew DeSantis,
And I'm Kaylie Shapiro
and welcome to the NYRA Bets Road to the Kentucky Derby.
and the Kentucky Oaks.
And welcome to another episode of Road to the Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks right here on NYRA Bets YouTube. Myself, Matthew DeSantis, joined by my colleague Kaylie Shapiro. And we're going to be recapping some great races that took place Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday as we finally wrapped up the 100-point prep races leading up to the Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks. Now, before we get into recapping, giving out our top 10, talking about some of the dynamics that we saw in these races, want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe on NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos are dropping on the channel, whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, weekly programs like this one, and so much more. So press that like and subscribe button today. Well, Kaylie, like I said, we've had a massive last few days of racing. Saturday was a full day, but then because of those cancellations at Keeneland last week, Monday and Tuesday was full of racing in the Bluegrass State. And we saw some big performances, some disappointing performances, and everything in between. What a last few days.
Yeah, definitely a crazy weekend and a crazy Monday, Tuesday, definitely compared to the regular Monday, Tuesdays. But first off, apologies for my voice if I sound a little sick. Definitely Wood Memorial standing out in the rain had me a bit under the weather. Was watching Keeneland from my bed the last 2 days, but definitely very, very exciting racing and some big performances from Burnham Square. I thought it was ultra impressive today, and
Yeah.
East Avenue I thought was as well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some trouble at the end with the lead, and he happened to get caught. It went super fast, but yeah,
Yeah.
definitely Keeneland was very exciting and cool. That I love opening weekend all the time, so that was great to watch.
Always a great time. And speaking of Keeneland, we're actually going to be down there starting next week through the following week. We're going to be at Keeneland. So if you see us, come out and say hi. But we're also going to be going over to Churchill Downs, getting some workout videos, hopefully, and getting some insight to people who are getting ready for the Oaks and Derby preps. We're going to be visiting some of the farms and seeing some great stallions as well. So we're going to be down in the Bluegrass State. That's going to be a lot of fun.
It's gonna be so much fun. Definitely gonna have tons of content from Keeneland, just the regular Keeneland meet, all the
Yep.
stakes races taking place, any maiden races, which are super exciting at this time of year, and then obviously all the barn content we're gonna get, and of course the Derby and the Oaks works are gonna be
Yeah.
probably the best part, and it's gonna be really great to provide insights on how everyone's looking leading up. And I've never been out there for Derby and Oaks work, so I'm very excited to go out there.
Yeah, same. I've never been there for Derby and Oaks. This past year was my first time seeing the Breeders' Cup works when I was out there at Del Mar. So, yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot of fun to check it all out. So, make sure to follow all of us, whether it's Kaylie on X, myself on X, NYRA Bets on X. That's where you're going to be getting all this, and we're going to have a ton on YouTube as well. But listen, like we said, last few days have been crazy. We're recording this Tuesday night, just a
Mhm.
couple of hours after the Bluegrass was run. So, let's start and maybe go in reverse order. We'll start with Keeneland and kind of work our way back through the weekend. But we saw the Bluegrass Stakes today, and you mentioned it, a return to form for East Avenue. The Brendan Walsh trainee, the Godolphin runner, had not really run well since last year's Breeders' Futurity. I think we both thought you could make some excuses for those last two efforts, but still needed to show something. He showed a lot today. Yes, he finished second, but that was a gutsy effort on the lead. Clearly, with the blinkers on, the intent was get to the front. Luan Machado did that. But ultimately, we got to give flowers to Burnham Square, who just came running from off the pace, made up a ton of ground late. And, we'll see, watch the stretch run here. You see East Avenue in those Godolphin blue silks really digging in, would not let anybody get past him to his outside. And Burnham Square coming down the middle of the track on the far outside, gave up a ton of ground to make that move, but was able to make it in the final stretch.
Yeah, Burnham Square was very impressive. Obviously, East Avenue set very fast fractions, and I don't even think it's necessarily that he tired. I think obviously you could see he switched back to the wrong lead towards the end of the race, so that definitely could have costed him with how
Yeah.
close that was. But not to take it away from Burnham Square, that was the horse that scared me the most because obviously once I saw East Avenue's odds, I was all in on him. But
Yeah.
Burnham Square, very impressive, and that horse definitely belongs on Derby lists after that for sure. So
Yeah, it was an impressive effort. We already found out he earned a 96 Beyer speed figure. I would imagine that means East Avenue probably earned a 96 as well, maybe a 95. which, like I said, is a return to form. Because if you remember, East Avenue earned a 95 Beyer speed figure when he won that Breeders' Futurity. So this kind of shows, yes, he can run that race. Question is now, can he run that race outside of Keeneland? Because that's where his two kind of best efforts have been to this point.
He'll
And
get a bit better.
yeah, but he's going to be a pace dynamic for sure because he qualified. He's in the starting gate, so he's going to be part of that early pace scenario now in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, definitely. So it's definitely becoming pretty formful. We're going to see the horses like, Rodriguez and him obviously are going to be pretty
Yeah.
forwardly placed. So you can kind of start seeing how the dynamics are going to play out. But yeah, I definitely am curious to see if he can replicate that type of trip outside of Keeneland. That'll be interesting to tell. And he'll probably have to improve a bit more. That 95, still, we've seen some bigger numbers this weekend that
Yeah.
tower above that 95 a bit. So he is going to have to obviously improve off of that. But I don't think it's out of the question, and definitely be a major pace setter in the race too.
Absolutely. And considering the pace dynamics that we've seen the last few years, a horse like Burnham Square obviously is going to get the pace set up. A horse that is going to be able to come from off the pace and was able to do that today, obviously on a track that tends to be pretty speed favoring, like Keeneland. One of the things that I found interesting was after the race was over, trainer Ian Wilkes had said he didn't really have the screws tightened for the Fountain of Youth, that he kind of took it easy on the horse. He's like, listen, he's not the biggest horse in the world. I didn't want to push the gas pedal down too hard in that Fountain of Youth. And he goes, we came here and we knew we needed points. And I put the pedal down in terms of getting him cranked up, and you saw how good he could run. He goes, we got to keep the pedal down between now and the first Saturday in May. He's a horse that he clearly likes the distance and it gets stronger late. So he's a serious player. And like you said, deserves to be on people's top lists.
Yeah, I think so too. And he just keeps improving. So he can be pretty dangerous. And you might even he's one of the horses that you're likely, out of the horses that keep improving and ran figures like that you could get a pretty decent price on, I'd imagine. I guess we'll see, but definitely on my radar for the Derby.
Absolutely. No, for sure. Listen, we also have to talk Owen Almighty faded late. It looks like trainer Brian Lynch said they're regrouping. That was the exact terminology that he said after the race. I would imagine that means we're not going to the Kentucky Derby, even though he does have enough points to qualify for the starting gate. Likely going to be cutting back to be a sprinter in all likelihood. Whether that is the Pat Day Mile or the Woody Stevens later this summer, we'll see. But that's the likely.
Yeah, and then Chancer McPatrick, I mean, I don't really know I guess he just really didn't do much running at all. Something that definitely stands out is that he has not grown whatsoever. I mean, I was looking at him next to the other horses. He's pretty small. Not like that's a reason to count the horse out, but that was something I definitely noted, that I noticed last time as well. And then I just don't think that he did much running. So I do wonder if they'll regroup with him, figure out maybe a one-turn mile, making one run could be more ideal for him, rather than waiting so long and taking so much kickback. I don't really know what it could be, but he didn't do much running. So
he did, and he got bet like he was going to do a lot of running. The public was really in on Chancer, and I was always a little skeptical because you were the one to first point out to me in that Tampa Bay Derby. You're like, he hasn't gotten much bigger at all. And some horses are like that. They're big at 2, and they just don't grow much between 2 and 3, whereas others grow into their frame and they grow out a little bit more and they get bigger. And so, we see it all the time. But to your point, maybe that means he's more of a sprinter. Maybe that means he needs to cut back, maybe not go such a grueling distance, and his late running style is probably better set up for coming from off the pace with faster fractions. So, some regroupings that has to get done. And then some other people are making plans for the first Saturday in May. So, your fortune is going to go one of two ways in these sorts of prep races sometimes. But listen, let's talk about the Ashland, which got run on Monday. And this one, very interesting race that maybe we should have seen coming, because a race that we're going to talk about a little bit later, the Gazelle, was won by Ballerina who had finished third in the Devona Dale. The horse that finished second that day, Cara, comes back and wires the field in the Ashland. I got to say, this was an impressive effort for this Mark Casse training.
It was so impressive, and it makes a lot of sense, honestly, because they had said the entire time that the Ashland was the source's main goal. And that, I was saying that since the beginning. I didn't pick her. I didn't do picks for this race, but I didn't have her. I wish I did at those odds. She put on such a impressive performance. Obviously, we see Muhima didn't get the lead, and she's better. She runs way better when she gets the lead. But Cara just completely got up and wired the field, and I thought that was a very impressive effort from her, and she improved a ton. And she's just a nice, classy filly as well. So I really like her. She moved up, I think, a bit on my list, but
Yeah.
yeah, definitely going to be very dangerous come Oaks time, I believe. And
Yeah.
Muhima, I
Yeah.
think Muhima bled set in the
Yeah.
chart. So I do wonder what's going to happen with her. I don't know what the exact rules are with the vet with working in front of them, but we are feels like sort of a time crunch. I'm not sure exactly how it
Yeah.
works, but just something to keep an eye on for her in the Oaks. But yeah, definitely that was a really impressive race by Cara. And not to mention, Take Charge Milady
Yes.
might have run the best race out of all of them. Honestly, she didn't have the easiest trip, and the way that she rallied up for second, the way that she
Yeah.
did was very impressive, and she moved up a ton on my list. That horse is
Yeah.
going to be very dangerous in the Oaks, I think, and she's improving with every start as well.
I agree. I know she is improving, and she was one that made up a ton of ground late. Like you said, you saw her kind of making up ground on the inside on a day when there weren't a lot of horses making up a lot of ground. She really made it up. And Cara, by and large, was able to kind of sit alone in the lead. So,
Mm-hmm.
to track down a leader that was kind of easy up on the lead in the front
Mm-hmm.
end, it makes it all the more impressive. And yeah, we'll have to see about Muhima. She feels like a need the lead horse that maybe has progressed the last couple of times out. Obviously, the note about her bleeding. Obviously, the Cox barn will do what's right for her long term, and you always said from the very start when we first talked about Muhima, she was a big-bodied filly that might take a long time to develop. You reminded you of Idiomatic and reminded you of some of these horses that you don't see run well until maybe a little later in their 3-year-old campaign, maybe even in a 4. It's not unusual to see that from horses, and
Yeah,
so maybe she goes to the bench for a while and comes back a better version of herself.
for sure. Maybe she is a late developing horse, or maybe she's just a big bodied sprinter. I don't really know.
Yeah,
Definitely some questions there. Depending, she's a big filly, and I've always said, if she doesn't get the lead, she's going to have to navigate her way into places and stop and go. And I just never
yeah,
thought that any race really could pan out for a filly of her size doing that. But she is very nice. So I am curious to see what they
yeah,
do with her in the future. But I really think Take Charge Milady. I know she's not the winner, so but
yeah.
she really impressed me. I think she ran the best race.
No, and oftentimes it is the horses that might run second or third sometimes that are the ones that, encountered traffic trouble and didn't have the easiest trip, were running against track bias. And hey, those are the horses you're going to get a little bit more of a price on come Oaks Day, come Derby Day, because everybody sees the winner and is going to get
Mhm.
attracted to that winning horse. And it's the horse that finishes underneath sometimes that is the one you actually want on the actual Derby and Oaks Day. Well, let's transition from what happened at Keeneland to talk about what happened up here in New York over the weekend. And it feels fitting that we're going from Cara to Ballerina Doro, who, like I said, are both coming out of that Devonadale two-back for Cara. For Ballerina Doro, this was a very tactical choice by trainer Chad Brown to send her to the Gazelle. He thought the 1.125 was really the key, and the distance was the key rather than having her down in the Ashland. That proved to be the case because she needed all of the 1.125 to get by early on for Safi Joseph Jr. As those two locked up at the top of the stretch and put on a heck of a stretch duel for us and a really great show on Saturday at Aqueduct.
Yeah, definitely. I think Ballerina Dioro, I knew that obviously the distance was really going to help her be able to close. She did not have much pace to close into. She was kind of up against the track. She did get the job done, not like it was
Yeah,
super impressive. I actually really think early on ran a very good race, but uh, they ran about equal. I mean, Ballerina obviously got the
yeah,
job done at the end of the day, but yeah, it came back kind of slow, the race for
yeah,
the two of those, but that's kind of two back-to-back efforts that early on put together that things didn't really set up for the horse, and she ran really well. But Ballerina definitely came back a little slow, bumped her down a little. I don't know if she, maybe if she gets more pace to run into, that it could help. You'd imagine. So I guess we'll
yeah.
see. But it's hard to really endorse her in that top group of fillies with the way that the speed figure came back.
Yeah, Speed Figure came back with a 79, so a little bit slower, obviously. And I'll be honest, it was also a case where I know she's already got the blinkers on, but at the top of the stretch, I would have thought she was going to win by 3 lengths.
Yeah.
And she just kind of hung there and didn't really want to get by. And it's like, you saw Dylan go to the crop a couple times. It's like, come on, we got to get past this horse. And it was really just a matter of her pedigree, I think, ultimately in class, kind of just getting her across the wire first and
Yeah.
liking that 9 furlong distance.
Yeah, and it could have been a little bit of the track. I don't know, but we did see
Yeah.
some other horses able to make up ground throughout the day. I know mostly it was playing for speed,
Yeah.
but definitely, uh, I don't know. I mean, I need to see how she stacks up and draws in the Oaks.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
don't really think it's going to make that big of a difference. She's going to come from behind, but I would like to see her with maybe less to do,
Yeah.
in that race. But she still could be a major player, especially if she gets some pace to close into. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely not in my like top five, but filly
Right.
to take serious.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's interesting you bring up you Saturday. You're right, not a lot of passing going on. Although I will say the race that yours truly presented the winning trophy for, the Carter.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
Was won by
hmm
Crazy Mason, who came from 12 lengths off the pace. So you could put them
yes,
off the pace, but only if I was giving out the trophy. That was the rules, and so
yeah,
that's the rules. That it
yeah.
only I'm the key to all of this. Is that was my 10 seconds of fame. Shout out to my dad for DVRing that when at home and texting me about 3 hours later that I look good. So thank you, Dad. But this is the sort of thing that parents get excited about when their kids are on TV.
Yeah,
Uh, anyway, um,
that was
listen.
cool.
Speaking of, it was cool. Speaking of the speed favoring track, that's what we saw in the Wood Memorial. You and I talked about this race a bunch, both on camera and off camera, and we both said if they let Rodriguez get a lead, this thing's over.
Yeah,
And then, son of a gun, they let Rodriguez get a lead and an easy
yeah.
one. And guess what? It was over. And so, Mike Smith, they don't call him Big Money Mike for nothing. Flew into town. He knew he had one job: get this horse up in the lead. That's what he did. And the Bob Baffert trainee came in from California, went gate to wire, and dispatched the Captain Cook. Grande made a nice run down the middle of the track, but a really impressive effort by Rodriguez.
Oh my God, so impressive. That horse, I mean, he's a very cool horse. He just shipped into New York. He handled it well. And the way that he won was so impressive. I mean, it was a wide margin, that he had
Yeah.
the lead by and that he won by. And that's really what made it so impressive to me. I know that we said before that he could have been way faster than we thought. We were looking at his
Yeah.
maiden race. It was quicker than Citizen Bull ran, same track, same distance, and the Robert B. Lewis where that horse was rated. So definitely going into this, you knew if that horse got the lead, it would be game over. I do think I wasn't expecting the 7-2. That was pretty shocking.
Yeah.
So I went with Grande at the end of the day, who I thought would have been, a way bigger price than Rodriguez. It didn't pan out that way, but that horse ran, I think, a pretty
Yeah.
good race as well. He came very wide and he made up a ton of ground, actually. So maybe what I said earlier isn't that true when you really think about it. We did see some horses that were able to make up ground, and he did so very impressively. His pedigree is just phenomenal for the Derby, and
Yeah.
he should be able to get in. So that's a horse that I think Grande, next time we see him, I mean, it will be the Derby, but I think that
Yeah.
we'll see a big improvement from him. And he really impressed
Well,
me.
here's one thing I know, Kaylee. The Derby is going to be a more fun place because Mike Rapoli is going to be there in the paddock. Now that's going to be a good time. You get Mike
Absolutely.
Rapoli in the paddock. He might. I don't know. I don't think John Stewart has a starter now. If those two had starters in the Derby, they might get into a fist fight right there just for the Netflix show. But listen, it is. It's and I joke about Rapoli. I mean, he was jumping up and down. There was a video of him that he posted on
Awesome.
social
Yeah.
media. So
Mhm.
excited. A lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. I love that, seeing that sort of
Yeah.
enthusiasm out of the ownership group. So, I'm serious when I say the Derby is going to be more fun because Mike Rapoli is a part of it.
Yeah.
That is a very serious statement from me. So,
Of
I don't
course.
say it tongue in cheek at all.
Of course, I would have been jumping up and down the same way if my
Oh yeah.
my horse ran to get second the way he did. Wow, he was very impressive. So I would have been jumping just the same. I'm happy that horse is actually really, really nice, and I'm happy
Yeah,
that he ran the way that he did. It was kind of,
I
I
am
thought I was
too.
taking a shot in the dark, but his pedigree lived up to what we saw on the track as well. So
It did, and again, to circle back to Rodriguez, earned a 101 Beyer speed figure. Obviously, ran back to almost exactly what he ran. He ran a 100 to break his maiden, but it
mm,
also proves what we said. You put this horse in the lead; it's a different type of horse, and you don't
yeah,
let him rate off speed like sitting off Citizen Bull, like sitting off Barnes. Yeah, he's gonna go fast and he's gonna wire the field. Now that all seemed it was funny. A lot of people had Rodriguez suddenly very high on their list. Now suddenly East Avenue a couple of days later, he's gonna be in the Kentucky Derby. Now you start thinking, well, now there's a little bit more of a pace battle, especially because they said, despite what we're going to see in a little bit when we talk about Santa Anita, the intent still is to send Citizen Bull to the Kentucky Derby per ownership. So, we'll see if that ends up happening or not, but there's a lot of potential speed now suddenly. So, but the bottom line is Rodriguez showed he's a very, very good horse being able to wire
yes.
the field, and he's a legitimate contender in the Derby.
Yes, and I think he's better than Citizen Bull. I think he's better than a few other
Yeah,
Bafferts. So I really hope that that's his main player in the Derby. I think that horse has a ton of potential. I was so impressed by him in person too in the paddock. Felt really lucky to get to see him for the first time. Just beautiful animal. That
yeah,
aside,
he is.
for the race that he ran, I do believe if he gets the lead, he could be deadly, especially because he's probably going to be able to sustain his run based on what we
Yeah,
saw as well. So.
yeah. No, he was very beautiful. We talked in the paddock, kind of reminded us of Zandon a little bit, that beautiful black horse. So, going to be a lot of fun, that's for sure. Now, let's head out west and talk about Saturday at Santa Anita, which was kind of bookended by maybe one of the more disappointing victories that you could see
Yes.
and one of the more impressive victories you could see. And
Mhm.
so it was very interesting to see. But then Santa Anita Oaks, Tenma gets the job done. It wasn't really pretty. The number came back really slow, only a 75. She struggled getting by her stablemate, who hasn't run since January and was a sprinter and stretching out for the first time. So it was, like I said, it wasn't a very pretty stretch run, but Tenma ultimately looms up, sits off the pace. Silent Law, who, like I said, was the stablemate from Bob Baffert, who was stretching out for the first time and was not running since January, kind of gave her a lot there in the stretch. You could see how Silent Law is struggling in the stretch, and yet Tenma's still not really putting this horse away. But she ultimately gets the job done.
Yeah, she did get the job done. It did come back slow. This was a filly that I was very high on in the beginning. First of all, I mean that too, Silent Law. That horse was really like not running towards the end, like
No.
whatsoever. And Tenma was, yeah. So clearly that's a different Tenma than we saw in her
Yeah.
last two starts, and definitely bumped her down a few pegs. But that horse, I mean, she won. She got the job done prior to, I mean, I know it came back as a 75. Prior to, she ran a 92, she ran an
Yeah.
83. She was improving. She's run some really good figures. So I'm not tossing her completely just because she ran a slow race. I don't know, maybe she wasn't fully cranked. I mean, no offense to the other runners in there. That was a
Yeah.
walk. I viewed it as a walkover for Tenma based on the form and what we've seen before from the other runners. So
Yeah.
maybe she wasn't fully cranked up. I don't know, even though she was really being asked at the end, maybe she
Yeah.
wasn't cranked up. She still has to make that big trip out here for the Kentucky Oaks, so that really wouldn't shock me. And that Silent Law, her stablemate, was definitely in there, to give Tenma a target as well. So,
Sure.
yeah, there are some questions about that, but definitely knocked her down a few pegs. It was a bit disappointing. I really was
Yeah.
high on that filly. I'm not going to say that that wasn't disappointing, but
Yeah.
definitely not tossing her out of the picture completely.
No, and it was one of those races, and our colleague at NYRA, Sarah El Badwi, sometimes will say this. I know I've heard her say this in Talking Horses before, where she goes, sometimes an effort is so bad last time out, you almost have to cross a line through it. And this was, yes, it was a win, but sometimes you see an effort like that, and you go, I don't even know what to make of this. Like, this was just such a bad performance. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it is something, but it's going to be interesting because she is an off the pace runner. that's the thing, is she's not this kind of like speedball that was tiring late or something like that, so she should get a nice setup in the Kentucky Oaks because there's a decent amount of speed it looks to be signed on there. So, maybe she bounces back at Churchill, and
It's
you never
true.
know. Yeah,
And maybe she actually runs better if she gets a bigger field. She's been running against
maybe.
tiny fields. That's another
It's a
thing.
great point.
There's a lot of questions I have. Even if she won and it was impressive and she ran like a 92 or a 93,
Yeah,
I would still have a ton of questions because she's going to have to face a way larger
yeah,
field than she's ever faced before. Obviously, she's going to have to ship over, and it is hard to tell how that form is going to translate stacked up against the horses out here. But she is someone I'm really going to pay close attention to her for a fact when we're down there taking a look at all these fillies. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to make something out of that. It definitely was a
yeah,
regression. She got the job
yeah,
done, but a little
yeah.
disappointing.
And maybe that will help her do a little bit better if she gets a little bit more pace to run into, and she gets a bigger field and she gets more horses, and that might be something that's beneficial ultimately for her. And yeah, but listen, let's go from one race that was maybe a little disappointing to one race that was I don't want to say it was a star-making race, because I think in a lot of ways this last race was a star-making race, but they, coming off the heels of the announcement that Michael McCarthy and the connections had signed a deal with Coolmore for the future of journalism. Journalism goes out and wins the Santa Anita Derby. And again, a small field of 5, he managed to find trouble in a 5-horse field. And I'm going to show a little bit more of this replay than I normally would, because I think it's important that people see just the position he was put in to have to come from off the pace here. And so this was coming down the backstretch. You see him on the inside. Now he's having to angle out because for some reason Rispoli decides he's going to get behind Westwood, who we all know is going to start backing up. So now Baeza and Citizen Bull have a 5-length jump on him. He's got to start making up ground here. And Citizen Bull's up on the lead. Westwood had already softened him up. Baeza, now the stablemate to Westwood, is coming at him with a big run. Gets by Citizen Bull, but this whole time journalism's having to really work, coming wide, coming from off the pace, making up a lot of ground. And yet again, just like last time out, once he gets rolling, you're not stopping this horse.
Yeah, I think this was the best race of the weekend. This horse put in another huge effort back to back. He, like you said, he had a ton of trouble in the race, and not to mention he was going up against 2 pairs of stablemates that were setting.
Yeah.
That Westwood was in there for Baeza and the 2 Bafferts as well. So
Yeah.
that horse just overcame literally every obstacle, which I'm not surprised by. But yeah, that was a very impressive effort. I was excited. I had Baeza underneath him, and I think Baeza put in a pretty decent effort as well, ran a huge figure. That horse is very impressive as well, and is just going to continue to improve. So I'm pretty excited about Baeza. I really hope that horse can get into the Derby. I think actually those 2 tower over a lot of the horses out on the East Coast, the 2 of them.
It is impressive. And remember, if we talked about this extensively last week when Ryan Anderson joined us, but Baeza was a horse we both identified. We both said this might be the best bet of the race in terms of the best value to percentage chance of winning. Because journalism, of course, was an incredibly short price come post time, but Baeza kind of kept some decent value. And remember, this is the coming out of the same broodmare that produced Kentucky Derby winner Mage and Belmont Stakes winner Dornoch. So Baeza's got the pedigree. We know that for sure. And this is a horse that just keeps getting better now and earned a 101 buyer speed figure for that effort, which is the same as Rodriguez and a lot faster than, like you said, just about anybody on the East Coast. So a very serious horse, but because of the short field of only 5 runners, normally a runner-up would get 50 points. Baeza only gets 37.5 points. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but he's going to need some work and some people to drop out, which I think they will, but he's going to need quite a few people to drop out to get in the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, it seems like 50-50, depending on, the Bafferts that go, maybe. I really wonder what they're going to do. I think they're obviously probably still going to send Citizen Bull. I mean, we saw that horse. We have to touch on it. That horse faced
Yeah.
pressure, and he could not get the distance. And
Nope.
that's really what you'd imagine, based on his running style. It was a question if he were able to get out and get the lead, but that, he had a horse pressuring him the entire way with Westwood that was there for Baeza as well. So very interesting race. I thought we learned a lot. Barnes as well, who actually probably is going to cut back, I'd imagine, in distance as well. So definitely we learned a lot from that race. And you brought up the journalism, getting a stud deal thing. And I know a lot of people were thinking, well, he has the stud deal. Now he's going to go and he's not going to be cranked and he's going to go and win the Derby. But I guess, there are these things in these stud deals called like kickers, where if you win a grade one, that's a grade one win for him now. So that, that increases his value. I'm not saying that, they really had to crank him up to get that grade one. Clearly not. But, I don't think that they were going to be holding him back. That really increases his value, especially going into Triple Crown, where we don't really know anything could happen. So
sure. No, once you get to the Triple Crown races, anything absolutely can happen. And yeah, I mean, listen, you saw those kickers on Seize the Gray's stud deal from last year. If I'm not remembered, my racehorse kind of publicized that. Again, if you get another grade one, we were there at Parks that day when he got another grade one. There's a reason that 2,000 owners were very happy, because that stud deal got a little more, a little richer that day, because that horse got another grade one to his name. So those are big deals if you can get that done. And listen, journalism stamped himself as the number one contender without a doubt by doing this. I mean, you overcome that speed favoring track. You overcome, like you said, not one, but two pairs of stablemates. And, that race was set up for him to lose and he still won. So very, very impressive effort. And with that, let's transition and talk a little bit about the point standings and where we are. Here are your up-to-date top 10 point standings. Now, listen, everybody take a step forward and raise your hand if you have Burnham Square as the leading Kentucky Derby point getter after all the preps were finished. I don't think many people are going to raise their hands for that one. You didn't expect it to happen, but it did. Burnham Square at 130, Sandman Journalism, Rodriguez, Tistastic, Tappan Street, Sovereignty, Final Gambit, Coal Battle, Chunk of Gold. Out of that top 10, I think the biggest question, of course, is Final Gambit, who won the Jeff Ruby Stakes. This is a turf horse that has never run on dirt. Going to be interesting to see if they send to the Kentucky Derby this year. But there's some other horses that are lower down that are already saying, Owen Almighty's, even a River Thames. That's a horse that might not end up going that's up there. So there's going to be some defections in that second 10 from this list of Derby and Oaks points, from Derby's point standings, I should say.
For sure. I'd imagine they'd send Final Gambit, take a shot. I think the horse should handle running on the dirt, but yeah, definitely going to be interesting to see how everything changes when we know who's actually going and who's not. Same thing on the filly side. I mean, I can't think of anyone on this list who wouldn't be going off the top of my head. No, maybe Muhima's not on there in the top 10, but obviously the list goes longer. She would make it in the field if she wants to go, but yeah, definitely pretty interesting to see over these next couple of weeks. We'll get news probably week by week and get more of a clearer image, but yeah, definitely shaping up pretty quickly.
It is, and you're right. On the Oaks side, listen, there's only 14 starters in the Oaks, so this is basically most of your starting field right here. Is certainly the top 10 of the 14, and it's a nice field with Quiet Side of the Car, Good Cheer, 5G, Ballerina, Doro, Tenma early on, Take Charge Milady, Simply Joking, and Bless the Broken. And so, listen, going to be a lot of fun, but let's talk about our top 10 list, because that's what's more important. Who cares about the points? Let's talk about our top 10 lists. And Kaylie, I'll start with you. With your Oaks top 10 list. And, the very top of your list has kind of remained unchanged. Good Cheer and Quiet Side. But there's been you've had a lot of fluctuation over this last week in terms of moving some other horses around, up and down. And tell us a little bit about what you're thinking behind this list.
Yeah, a ton of fluctuations. I mean, Good Cheer obviously is the best filly in this group. She's undefeated. The big question is if anyone's going to beat her, who could it be? I start thinking about that, and then I think of Quiet Side, Take Charge Milady, and that's kind of why they fall right under her as well. Obviously, Take Charge Milady just put in a very impressive effort. She moved up a ton on my list. Quiet Side is a filly that just keeps getting better, keeps getting faster, and I think should be pretty dangerous. And then Cara, I think I've always had her kind of fourth or fifth, but
Yeah.
same thing with 5G. Simply Joking. There's going to be some speedballs in the race as well. So those ones kind of stayed in the same spot. Ballerina Dioro, I kept in around seventh. I think I had her there last time because we really haven't learned much else about her. I hope that,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah. And then underneath her, I put Early On. I could not really leave this filly off. She's put 2 back-to-back efforts that, again, didn't
Yes.
really step. So I thought that that one was a good one to have on. And obviously Tenma, she moved down drastically. I had this filly in third or fourth, I think, as the last
Yeah.
time we did this, showed our list. So yeah, off that effort, I did move her down a lot. She's not off my radar completely, but I had to based on that compared to the other performances that we saw. And then Muhima, I put asterisks next to her name. Just some questions, I guess, about what's going to happen. I'm not the news source for that. So I guess we'll all
Yeah.
find out, how she came out of that race, what's going to happen, just put asterisks there. But yeah, I like this top 10 a lot, but I definitely have a few fillies that I have listed.
Well, I was gonna say, Kaylie, because there's this top 10. Obviously, there's still some questions with a horse like Muhima. I know a horse that you really like a lot. We're waiting to see if she records a work anytime soon. Is a Hava, who's of course the half to Vava, who ran a really good second, a good cheer in that Fairground Oaks for Cherie DeVoe. That was a second effort. The horse improved on Bayer's speed figures from 81 to 85, stretching out for the first time. Hasn't worked since, which is a little bit of a red flag, but I know you are very high on her once she gets a work in and they know they're going to the Oaks.
Yeah, and she just hasn't worked since that race, which I think was she missed 2 weeks. The week after makes sense, but I
Yeah,
guess I'd like to see a work in the next couple of days.
sure.
I'd have, if I knew and they put out like, we're going to the Oaks, that's our plan. I think I would have a Hava maybe like in fifth on my list. Like I
Yeah,
think she could be pretty dangerous. She got an 85 for that effort last time out. That was only her second career start. And I think that she's one that can kind of upset the race a little bit, maybe if she makes it in and
yeah,
she improves. I think she could be pretty dangerous. And then 2 other fillies I have on my list underneath her. I have Bless the Broken, obviously,
yeah.
who won the Bourbonette. I've always really liked her.
You and
Curious
I
to see,
both. Yeah,
yeah, I'm curious
yeah,
to see how she's working up to the Oaks when we see her, but one definitely I'm going to filter in and out depending. And then also Anna's Promise as well, who we saw run second in the Gulfstream Park Oaks. And
yeah,
that filly, I wasn't really sure, on her pedigree or her running style, but I did a deeper look into her pedigree, and she had some, big Oaks horses under, I think, the second dam, and she had like some deep
yeah.
class of horses in her pedigree as well, which was nice to see. And I thought that was a really good effort in the Gulfstream Park Oaks. So another one that I have on my radar.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's a deep field, and if you think Good Cheer is the pick, then I get it. But she hasn't done anything wrong, literally. Uh, but then I think that there is a deep, list of contenders. Quiet Side, Take Charge Milady, maybe a Hava. Depending on how the pace scenario plays out, a horse like Lacara, 5G. Ballerina Doro. If there's a lot of speed coming from off the pace, maybe. There's a lot of dynamics here at play. Bless the Broken's a horse I know you and I both liked, who we saw running that Bourbonette Oaks. And I think it's a real nice horse as well. Real nice filly. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. That's for sure. And I'm sure this list will change a little bit as we get down to Kentucky and take a closer look at some of the workouts and see how some of these horses are doing. And obviously also news coming out over the next week or two, I'm sure, about, what the plans are for some of these horses maybe, and whether or not they all are going to the Oaks, or, you never know what ends up happening. Now, on my side, I have a couple of asterisks as well. I have an asterisk next to Grande, and I have an asterisk next to Baeza. Grande is technically not in the Kentucky Derby field. He is currently 21st out of 20. Now there's going to be at least one, if not 5 more defections from the Kentucky Derby field. So Grande is virtually guaranteed a spot in the Kentucky Derby. The bigger question is Baeza. Baeza needs some work. He needs, and I'm going to say she on Baeza all damn prep season. I know it. And so I just keep thinking it's a female because of the name. But Baeza, he is going to need some serious work to get in because he's going to need 6 horses to defect, or 5 horses, I think, to defect in order to get into the field. Now, he might get it, but it's going to be by the skin of his teeth, I think. So, but I like
really
a lot. Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I really hope
he gets in. Yeah, he's a good horse. But listen, I didn't get too creative at the top of my list. Journalism, put him up top. Sandman, a horse that finally put it all together last time out, should appreciate the 1.25 miles, should get the pace to run at. It seems like he's got the right jockey on him now with Jose Ortiz and moving the right direction. That's the effort we all wanted to see from him in that Arkansas Derby, and he finally kind of came through. Sovereignty, listen, I know you lost to Tappan Street, I should say, in the Florida Derby. I still really like Sovereignty. I think he's still a classy horse. He's going to get the right sort of pace set up. And again, I think the distance is not going to be a problem for him. Grande, I was incredibly impressed by that horse in the Wood Memorial, coming from off the pace, going wide. I thought was a really impressive effort. Tappan Street is a Brad Cox horse I like a lot, obviously. Won the Florida Derby, a young horse, an ascending horse. And really today flattered him a little bit more because remember, he lost to Burnham Square in that Holy Bull. Well, that looks pretty good now to lose to Burnham Square in the Holy Bull. That's not a knock at all. So his career efforts are a maiden win, a second to Burnham Square, and beating Sovereignty. That's not a bad resume to have 3 races into your career. So that's a horse that's on the come up. Tistastic for Asmussen coming out of the Louisiana Derby. Baeza, we've already talked about with regards to that Santa Anita Derby effort, the great pedigree there, sired by McKinsey, out of Puka. Rodriguez, I downgraded a little bit because of East Avenue drawing into the field, because of some additional speed that's probably going to come over, maybe from one of the UAE Derby winners. And there's might be some other speed signed on here. Does Citizen Bull run as well? Those two would seem to cancel each other out up on the front end, but it would lead to a hotter pace. I still think Rodriguez is a very serious contender, but I do have questions about whether or not that pace can really be controlled up on the front end. The last few years, we've seen it deteriorate in the Kentucky Derby. And then Burnham Square, that's a horse that might move up my list a little bit more as I digest this bluegrass a little bit as the next 24 to 48 hours. And then I got to, listen, I just love Chunk of Gold. He's a $2,500 purchase, son of preservationist. I just like this horse, and he's a deep closer too. And if there's a lot of pace, he's a horse that's going to come running late. So I think he's an interesting horse that I just like talking about more than anything else. And I also think he has continually shown the ability to move forward in his races. So going to be a lot of fun, though, to dissect these top 10 as we dive into all of this stuff so much more, like you said at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting. And I agree, like you just said, about how we've seen in a lot of the recent runnings that the pace hasn't held up and usually is won from horses coming from behind or off the pace. So your top 4 are horses that are likely to have those types of trips in the Derby.
Yeah.
I do wonder if you were and you had to put maybe like a speedball that you could see. I know obviously we have to see post positions and stuff, but you mentioned, I know you have Rodriguez there, and you mentioned you downgraded because of East Avenue's performance today, which I agree with. That, that could be an issue. If you were to pick between the 2 of them, I'm just curious. I guess you'd go with Rodriguez.
I'd probably go with Rodriguez over East Avenue. And honestly, it's because I've seen Rodriguez win on 2 tracks. And East Avenue won at Ellis Park in debut, I admittedly. But I can't shake the fact that maybe East Avenue just likes Keeneland a lot. And I just wonder, that's going to be a question that's just in the back of my mind. I love Godolphin. I love Brendan Walsh. I love the connections. I love that horse's pedigree. That's a beautiful horse as well. And he's a tough customer when he's up on the front end. But I just have a feeling Rodriguez is maybe a little bit better up front, and I have maybe fewer questions about him up front. So, yeah, if somebody were to spurt free and get clear, I'd have a little more confidence on Rodriguez over East Avenue. But again, we're only about 3 hours after the the bluegrass. So I got to dissect this more, but that's
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
no.
I agree.
But it's a good question. It's a really good question. So listen, we aren't quite done with preps yet. We do have one final prep, but it's probably not that significant for the Kentucky Derby. It might be more significant for the Preakness Stakes, which is the Lexington coming up this coming week at Keeneland. It's only a 20-point prep. Traditionally, this has been a prep that maybe a horse that's on the bubble for the Kentucky Derby runs in to try to get in. The field this year, it's a perfectly nice field. You have a horse like Prater for Chad Brown. You have a horse like Hypnus for Kenny McPeak that's in this race. So you have a couple of nice runners in here, but no horses that are really serious contenders for getting into the Kentucky Derby, even if they were to win. So it's not a race where you're expecting any sort of impact on the Kentucky Derby, but it's a race where maybe the winner uses this as a launching pad to prep for the Preakness and eventually run there.
Which that would make sense, yeah, for sure. And American Promise isn't going anymore, which I was honestly pretty happy to hear. He just put in a bullet work, I think, a week ago. So he's training really well. And I guess that would have been probably the big name in the race if he had gone. But he should be good, I think, regardless, if I'm not mistaken, on the point side. So obviously, I'm excited that, he's honestly skipping it and going to the Derby. I think that'll be good, but still going to be a good race. I haven't really
still gonna be a very good race. Of course, the highlight on Saturday is actually the Grade 1 Jenny Wiley on the turf. That's going to be a lot of fun. We got the Maker's Mark Mile and the return of a little fella I like to call Carl Spackler on Friday. Come on, let's go. Everybody loves some Carl Spackler. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That's why Keeneland's just a good time. So the Lexington Stakes, though, we will have a preview for it later this week. So make sure to come back to NYRA Bets and check that out. But Kaylie, it's going to be a lot of fun these next couple of weeks. And again, just to remind people, we're going to be down in Kentucky starting next Thursday through the following Friday. So if you're at Lexington, if you're at Churchill Downs, one of those days maybe that we're there, let us know. We'd love to come see and hang out. But going to be a lot of fun. And now, like you said, the homework starts. We got to dig into these past performances and dig into these horses a little bit more.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'll be recording the top 5 for the Oaks Sunday now that the Oaks preps are completed. So really excited about that. And definitely going to have lots of write-ups and everything leading up to even before Kentucky regarding the contenders. So that'll be a lot of fun to dive into, and excited to come back and preview the Lexington. I guess it'll be our last preview before
until the Kentucky Oaks.
So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That'll be a lot of fun. And we'll have a lot of written analysis up on NYRA Bets. Kaylie mentioned she'll have her top 5 video. I'll have an updated top 5 video as well. But I'll also start doing a contender spotlight series, which Kaylie, I know you're going to do a couple of those as well for the Oaks. But I just kind of 8 to 10 minute videos on each of the individual contenders that are going to be running in the races. So going to be a lot of fun. Plenty of content up here on NYRA Bets YouTube. So subscribe today. Well, that was a big weekend. We got plenty more. Kaylie, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in and watching this episode of Road to the Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks. For Kaylie Shapiro, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you it's now post time.